Congressman, what was your sense of, let's say, I'll say the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy doctrine of containment and, if necessary, confrontation of the Soviet Union in the aftermath of World War II? For a variety of reasons, we had gone from allies against the Axis powers to the two superpowers glaring at each other, each of us armed to the teeth, and Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy all talked about the doctrine of containment. We will confront you, challenge you, and fight you if necessary. What's your sense of all that? Was that not wise policy? And in the end, did that not prove to be the right policy for the United States?
Well, I think to some degree, but that's not what won the Cold War. The Cold War was won because socialism always fails, and the Soviet system went bankrupt, like we will if we're not careful. But we also talked to people. Reagan was tough with the Soviet Union, but he also negotiated with them. When the missiles were put in Cuba, yes, we were tough and we confronted and we contained and we said, get out of our way. But, at the same time, Kennedy took the missiles out of Turkey. So when they put the missiles next door to the Soviets, why shouldn't they respond by putting them next door to us? So that would be my argument. My argument would have been not to put the missiles in the first place in Turkey. Then maybe we wouldn't have had the confrontation in Cuba. So I would say, yes, you got to be strong and you got to confront them. You got to contain them if they're showing aggression. But in the same sense, you talk to them and you take a policy of standing back a little bit. That's why the confrontation with Iran is so dangerous. That thing is going to explode. This whole debate in Iraq is going to be irrelevant once they start bombing Iran and oil goes to $150 a barrel. Believe me, we're on the verge of some serious problems if we don't change our overall policy.
Congressman, a book that I've recommended to so many people called Charlie Wilson's War. He had to be a Texas colleague of yours.
Right.
Different party, of course. Charlie was a Democrat, I believe. You're obviously a Republican. My recollection of that book, the principal theme was Wilson saw it as a great way to create a Vietnam for the Soviet Union after they invaded Afghanistan, to create a resistance, to arm that resistance, to sort of break the legs, if you will, of the Soviet Union in its invasion of Afghanistan, similar to the way we were paralyzed and decimated in many ways in Vietnam. I'm assuming, but let me put it in your own words. What's your sense of our role, the role that we played behind the scenes in Afghanistan after the Soviet Union invaded?
Well, first, it was illegal. It wasn't authorized by the Constitution. It was a form of a war, and the Congress and the people of this country ought to know about it. I think it was unnecessary because the Soviets eventually would have failed anyway because the Afghans didn't want them there, just like the Afghans don't want NATO there now, and they just shot down a helicopter, so NATO will finally lose that war. And besides, we became an ally of Osama bin Laden, and we actually used our CIA to finance radical Islam to fight the Soviets. Now radical Islam is fighting us. It all comes back to haunt us. It's such a foolish policy. The blowback is just so painful. So I would say that was one of our a major mistake, even though you might take the case and say, hey, yeah, well, we got rid of the Soviets. Yes, maybe a little sooner, but the Soviets would have eventually had to leave, and it wouldn't have contributed to the mess that we face today, because now Osama bin Laden, just as we supported Saddam Hussein. I mean, we actually, we were an ally of Saddam Hussein and encouraged him to invade Iran. Why shouldn't the Iranians be mad at us? First we installed the Shah in the 50s, and then we helped invade them in the 80s, and now we're confronting them again. I mean, we have to be logical. How would we respond if the Soviets or the Russians or the Chinese did this to us? We would be furious. And then if they came and put their navy in the Gulf of Mexico or put troops on our land, we'd be furious. And people have to understand that if they want to understand why we are so despised by the Muslims around the world. It is not a religious phenomenon. That's part of it, but that is not the main reason why they want to come here and use suicide terrorism against us.
Congressman, one last question. I know you're pressed for time, and we're delighted with how much time you've given us. We're talking once again to Congressman Ron Paul. He'll be up in New Hampshire at the presidential debate. He's making waves on that side of the presidential campaign, and we're delighted to have him. You mentioned that the Afghans did not want the Soviets, and therefore the Soviets were bound to fail, and so on and so forth. But we have an Iraqi government right now that says they do want us there, even in the midst of the chaos and the carnage that you've described. So, what do you say when the government in place says we really do want you, we really do need you? Can you please stay and give us a fighting chance so that we don't have complete bedlam and chaos as our future?
Well, I don't think there's a real Iraqi government. I think we're in charge of that government, just as we're in charge of the Afghan government. Karzai is our guy. You know, if they had a real vote in Afghanistan, they would be voting to get us out. As a matter of fact, they're coming awfully close to expressing themselves in Iraq. There is a coalition of Sunnis and Shiites right now, and I've met with some of them who are talking to each other and both want us out. Even Sarder is talking to radical Sunnis because they're nationalists. They don't like us there, and they don't like the Iranians, and they don't like Al-Qaeda. So I think and our government has already admitted that if they ever vote to get us out of there, we're going to leave.
We're going to go, yeah.
Which is, I think, very, very healthy, because I believe if they had a real honest vote of all the politicians and all the people in Iraq right now, they would ask us to leave. Right now, I don't think that view has been expressed, mainly because of the artificialness of the government.
Okay. Well, listen, we've been talking to Congressman Ron Paul, and Congressman, I can't thank you enough for all the time you gave us. Good luck in the debate. You've been making news, making waves. Continue to count on you bringing that fabulous philosophy, long overlooked. We'd love to continue to speak to you. We've got a great audience here in Boston and Eastern Massachusetts, and a lot of good thinkers here listening and starting to nod their head whenever you stand up and speak up, Congressman.
Thanks a lot. Good to be with you.
Okay, sir. Thanks very, very much. That's Congressman Ron Paul. Again, he will be participating actively in his unique, iconoclastic way in the Republican presidential primary debate, and this guy brings a lot of thought to the table. Coming up on the forum, we are going to have the United States Senator Jim Webb, newly elected senator from Virginia, and plenty more on Finneran's Forum. We'll be back in a moment on AM 680 WRKO.
Making bigger headlines than any other morning show in town. It's Finneran's Forum on Boston's talk station AM 680 WRKO.